Let me be direct with you from the outset, because what is developing around Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar in the past several hours is not what the initial fragmentary reports suggest, and the silence from United States Central Command, which has not issued a statement in the past 4 hours, despite dozens of press inquiries on record, is not the silence of a command that has nothing to say. It is the silence of a command that is managing a situation that is not resolved. Everyone is focused on the warship movements. 45 vessels, according to Navy tracking platforms and confirmed in outline by the Naval Institute News, moving with an urgency that peacetime naval operations do not produce. Everyone is watching the carrier positioning, the aerial tanker deployments, the B-52 flight paths that ADS-B tracking data shows routing toward the Gulf region in the past 18 hours. But that is not the story. The warships are the consequence. The story is what produced the consequence, and what produced it reveals something about the fragility of American strategic positioning in the Gulf that should concern every person watching this, regardless of their political perspective. I am drawing from reporting by the Associated Press, from open-source military intelligence compiled by analysts including those at the Oryx Project and the Bellingcat investigation team, from statements made by Qatari and regional officials in the past 6 hours that are already being suppressed in English-language media, and from the physical evidence of what military assets are moving where and at what speed. This is not speculation. The movements are documented. The pattern they describe is not ambiguous. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to explain what is actually happening at and around Al Udeid, why the deployment of 45 warships represents a crisis response rather than a deterrence posture, what this means for the broader American military position in the Gulf, and why the outcome of the next 72 hours will reshape the regional security architecture in ways that will outlast the immediate crisis. Subscribe now if you are not already, because the next several hours are going to require the kind of contextual analysis that does not fit in a 2-minute television segment. Let us start with Al Udeid itself, because the base is one of the most significant pieces of American military infrastructure anywhere in the world, and its significance is systematically underreported in Western media. Al Udeid Air Base, located approximately 35 kilometers southwest of Doha, Qatar, is the largest American air base in the Middle East. It hosts the forward headquarters of United States Central Command and United States Air Forces Central. According to the Department of Defense's own public fact sheets, it is capable of supporting more than 10,000 military personnel and hosts more than 100 aircraft at any given time. It is the command nerve center for American air operations across the entire CENTCOM area of responsibility, which stretches from Egypt to Central Asia and includes every active American military engagement in the region. The base sits on Qatari sovereign territory under a defense cooperation agreement that Qatar has maintained with the United States since the 1990s. Qatar is simultaneously the host of the largest American air base in the Middle East and one of the most significant diplomatic interlocutors with Hamas, Hezbollah's political network, and the Taliban. Qatar hosts the political bureau of Hamas. Qatar maintains one of the most active diplomatic relationships with Iran of any Gulf state. And Qatar, more than any other Gulf state, has demonstrated both the political will and the practical capacity to maintain relationships across every faction in the regional conflict landscape simultaneously. This context is essential for understanding what is happening right now, because the situation at Al Udeid is not separable from Qatar's unique and deliberately ambiguous strategic position. Announcement number 1, and this is the announcement that the combination of deployment pace and communication silence makes impossible to describe in any other terms. According to ship tracking data from marine traffic and confirmed by multiple maritime monitoring services, the naval movement toward the Gulf theater that began in the past 18 hours represents the fastest concentration of American naval assets in this region since the period immediately preceding the 2003 invasion of Iraq. 45 surface vessels with submarine accompaniment that by definition does not appear on open-source tracking, moving toward a geographic concentration around the Strait of Hormuz and the northern Persian Gulf, represents a response posture, not a scheduled exercise, not a rotation, not a scheduled presence operation. The distinction matters. American naval exercises in this theater are announced in advance, coordinated with regional partners through established communication channels, and accompanied by public affairs statements that describe their purpose. None of those things have happened here. The movement is real. The official explanation is absent. And in the world of military operations, unexplained rapid movement of major naval assets toward a specific theater is not ambiguous. Stay with me, because the silence from CENTCOM is itself the most significant public signal available. United States Central Command has a public affairs apparatus that issues statements on matters far less significant than the movement of 45 warships. The fact that it has not issued a statement in response to documented media inquiries is consistent with one of two conditions. Either the situation is still developing in ways that make any statement premature, or the situation involves classified operational details that cannot be disclosed without compromising the operation itself. Neither of those conditions describes a routine deterrence deployment. Dr. Bilal Saab, formerly a senior official at the Pentagon with responsibility for Middle East security policy and now a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, said in a public comment earlier today that the pace of naval movement was, and I am reflecting his stated assessment here, inconsistent with normal deterrence signaling and more consistent with a crisis response. That assessment from someone with direct professional experience in American Middle East military operations carries significant weight. According to Al Jazeera Arabic's regional correspondents and corroborated and outlined by Reuters reporting on Qatari government communications, the Qatari government has convened an emergency session of its Security Council in the past several hours. Emergency sessions of the Qatari Security Council are not convened for routine matters. Qatar's government does not voluntarily create the impression of crisis without a reason to do so, because Qatar's economic model and its diplomatic credibility both depend on projecting stability. Received. That is announcement number one. Something significant enough to trigger an emergency Qatari Security Council session and the fastest American naval concentration in this region in more than 20 years is developing around Al Udeid Air Base. Announcement number two, and this is the dimension of the situation that explains why 45 warships represents a response rather than a deterrent. The American military presence in Qatar, despite its scale and its strategic centrality, rests on a political foundation that is considerably more complicated than the clean fact of the Defense Cooperation Agreement suggests. Qatar's government has, in the past several years, received increasing domestic political pressure regarding the American military presence, particularly in periods when American military operations in the region have produced outcomes that are unpopular in Qatar and across the Arab world. According to academic research on Qatari domestic politics published by the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington and reported by Foreign Policy magazine, Qatari public opinion on the American military presence has become more complex in the wake of the Gaza conflict. Qatar's population, while not in a position to directly influence government policy in a system that does not have competitive democratic elections, nevertheless constitutes a political reality that the Qatari government monitors carefully. A government that is seen to be hosting the airbase from which American military operations are conducted that are broadly unpopular across the Arab world faces a form of political legitimacy cost that accumulates over time. The more immediate dimension of announcement number two is operational. According to regional security analysts, including Elijah Magnier, whose reporting on military developments in the region has a documented track record of accuracy, there have been specific threats communicated through indirect channels to the Qatari government regarding the continued hosting of American military operations at Al Udeid. The nature of those threats, which I will not characterize beyond what is documented in open source reporting, is consistent with the kind of communication that produces emergency Security Council sessions and triggers rapid naval deployments. If those threats involve the prospect of direct action against the base itself, the operational calculation facing American planners is genuinely complex. Al Udeid is not invulnerable. No fixed installation is invulnerable. And Al Udeid's location, its known coordinates, its fixed infrastructure, its documented approaches and flight paths make it a target that any actor with precision strike capability could plan against with considerable accuracy. The question is not whether a strike on Al Udeid is physically possible. The question is whether any actor in the region has both the capability and the political will to execute it, and what the consequences of such an action would be. Stay with me here because the consequences question is where the 45 warships become comprehensible. The American military deployment is not, at this scale, a deterrent against small-scale harassment. 45 warships is a warfighting force. It is the kind of force you deploy when you are preparing for a major military exchange, not when you are sending a diplomatic signal. And the question that every government in the region is asking right now, with considerably more urgency than any Western television audience, is whether the American deployment will produce deterrence or whether it will produce escalation. Announcement number three, and this is the one that almost no one in the mainstream Western coverage is connecting properly. The 45 warships moving toward the Gulf do not exist in isolation. They exist in a regional context in which every other major military actor is also moving. Iranian naval assets have in the past 24 hours demonstrated what regional monitoring networks describe as heightened alert posture. Russian naval assets in the Caspian and Black Sea regions are being watched closely for any repositioning. And the Qatari Air Force, which operates American-supplied F-15QA aircraft, has increased its combat air patrol tempo to a degree that is visible on radar monitoring systems. This is not a bilateral American-Iranian standoff. It is a regional military system moving toward a higher state of tension simultaneously across multiple actors. And when multiple military actors move toward higher alert simultaneously, the risk of miscalculation, accidental escalation, communications failure increases in ways that are not linear. The risk does not double when two actors escalate. It multiplies because each actor's response to the other's movements is itself a signal that the third and fourth actors must interpret and respond to. Senior military officials with experience in crisis management have consistently described this kind of simultaneous multi-actor alert escalation as the most dangerous condition in international security. Not because any single actor necessarily wants war, but because the decision space in which each actor is operating narrows as the clock accelerates and the situation develops faster than deliberate political decision-making can manage. Let us talk about what is actually happening beneath the official silence, because the absence of official statements is its own form of communication. Western governments are not saying nothing because nothing is happening. Western governments are managing a gap between what is happening and what can be publicly stated without either alarming domestic audiences or foreclosing the diplomatic options that are presumably being pursued through back channels simultaneously with the military deployment. This is what crisis management looks like in real time. The public face is silence. The private face is frantic, and the outcome depends on whether the back-channel communication that is certainly happening right now produces a de-escalation path before the military positioning becomes its own irreversible escalatory fact. The historical parallel that sits most directly on what we are observing is the Cuban Missile Crisis of October 1962. Not because the parallels are exact, they are not, but because the structure of the situation has recognizable features. A superpower discovers a threat to a critical position. It responds with an overwhelming military deployment. The adversary faces a choice between backing down and escalating. Back-channel communication proceeds simultaneously with public confrontation. And the outcome depends entirely on whether the communication succeeds before the military postures produce an incident that removes the decision from the hands of the people trying to manage it. In October 1962, Robert McNamara, then Secretary of Defense, spent 13 days not sleeping. He later described those 13 days as the period during which the survival of human civilization was genuinely at issue, not metaphorically, but operationally. The reason it did not end in catastrophe was not primarily because the right decisions were made at the top. It was because the back-channel communication that produced the eventual resolution, which involved American commitments regarding Turkey that were deliberately kept secret from the American public for years, succeeded before the military situation produced an irreversible incident. The situation unfolding around Al Udeid right now has the same structural features at a different scale. The back-channel communication is happening. Whether it succeeds before the military positioning produces an incident is not yet known. Three paths, stated with the directness the situation requires. Path 1, the back-channel communication succeeds. The threats that precipitated the emergency are addressed through a combination of Qatari diplomatic mediation, which Qatar's unique position makes it capable of facilitating, and American security commitments, and the military deployment serves its deterrent purpose without producing a direct engagement. The ships return. The alert levels decrease. The underlying tensions remain unresolved, but the immediate crisis passes. This is the optimal path and the one that everyone involved is presumably working toward. Path 2. The situation escalates to a direct military exchange, either through deliberate action by an actor that has calculated the risks as acceptable or through accident or miscalculation during the period of maximum military tension. This path leads to consequences that are genuinely unpredictable beyond the first exchange, because the second and third order effects of a direct military exchange in the Gulf involve oil market disruption, regional conflict expansion, and a cascade of alliance commitments that could draw in actors beyond the immediate parties. Path 3. The crisis is resolved by an American decision to reduce its presence at Al Udeid in ways that address the political concerns that contributed to the crisis, in exchange for guarantees of the base's immediate security. This path involves a negotiated reduction of American military posture at one of its most significant regional installations, which would represent a significant strategic concession. It is the path of least immediate risk and the highest long-term strategic cost for American regional influence. I think Path 1 is what is being attempted. I am not confident it will succeed within the time frame that the military positioning allows for deliberate decision-making. And I want to be honest with you, the next 72 hours matter more than any statement anyone will make about them. Here are the questions I want you to hold. First, what does it mean for American strategic posture in the Gulf if Al Udeid's security can be threatened in ways that require a 45 warship response? Second, is Qatar's dual role as American base host and regional diplomatic broker sustainable as the regional conflicts deepen? And third, what does the pace of events in the past 18 hours tell us about how much warning any of us will actually have when the next major escalation in this region occurs? Tell me in the comments what you think is happening that we are not being told. Tell me whether you think the back-channel communication will succeed or whether this is moving faster than diplomacy can manage. We will keep tracking every development in real time, every ship movement, every official silence, every back-channel signal that becomes visible in the open source record. That is what this analysis does every day without the filters that shape what you see on your television. Subscribe now. Share this with your network. Turn on notifications. We will see you in the next briefing.